Greetings everyone, welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes right here on the YouTube. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now so you'll get a ding every time one of these new free classes goes up. This week, I'm super excited to be talking about another tool of the green art. This one happens to be my favorite tool for making magic and medicine. It is none other than the mortar and pestle. This week, my friends, we are getting into it. We're going to talk about the mortar and pestle as a utilitarian tool. We're going to talk about the magic and the ritual behind this tool. We're going to talk about some of the mysteries, and I'm going to talk to you about some of my own mortar and pestle pieces and how I use them in my practice. Again, this is my absolute number one go-to tool. If I only had to choose one or I could only have one, it would be this one. And I think by the end of this class, you'll understand why. If you're interested in this subject material, by the way, there's an entire chapter in my book, The Green Art, on tools, and a good chunk of a section on the mortar and pestle as well. So for folks who have read that book, we're going to go just a little deeper, give you some new angles and some new perspectives. So the utilitarian aspects of the mortar and pestle are pretty obvious, but they're important, right? That this particular tool in our work with the plant spirits helps us to grind and powder, to mix and mingle our herbs. Now, working with a mortar and pestle is a skill that comes with practice, right? Most people, when they first start, they take the pestle and they get in there and kind of just go crazy with it, which eventually will work, but there are ways to finesse it and take some of the tension out of the hands and the wrist, because getting most herbs down to a coarse grind, or especially if you're going into a fine powdery grind, like for making botanical incense, or for whatever reason need to have that material really opened up, it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of movement. So, I encourage people to go slow, to try to let the pestle do the work, right? These are heavy for a reason. You kind of want the weight of the pestle to lean in and do some of the work for you. Obviously, you've got to put a little bit of elbow grease in there, and the more elbow grease you put in, the faster your results might be. But take your time, lean into it, take breaks, make sure that you're stretching, make sure that your posture while you're sitting and working the herbs is good. I've seen people try to do this in their lap or hunched over on the floor, and while it might be a good way to start, especially in a ritual, it's not sustainable, and you'll end up really tense and really sore, which just makes you not want to work with this tool. So it is a meditation in being present, in taking your time, in listening to your body. I have powdered herbs before. Sometimes, working with herbs for crafting incense, I'm bringing them down to a talcum powder fine consistency, where it has taken me several days to get them to the consistency that I want. Obviously not grinding the whole time, but having to take breaks, doing 20 minutes or whatever amount I can do, taking a break, coming back, doing that several times a day over the course of several days, totally normal. So when you learn how to work with these tools and you learn how to lean in to the process and really enjoy the magic that's happening here, you can absolutely get textures and consistencies in your dried herbs that rival those that would come out of an electric coffee grinder. So it is a sacrifice. It is a process. Sometimes it's a challenge. I will not say that I haven't been incredibly frustrated sometimes with certain herbs. Really gummy resins can be problematic, and some of the hard seeds can really be problematic, but I will show you the mortar and pestles that I use for those guys, because this little guy is probably the one that I use the most, but doesn't always get into some of the tougher herbs. So those are the utilitarian practices of working with mortar and pestle. Now I want to talk about the applications within magic, within herbal magic and plant-based ritual, right? There is no better way to wrap yourself up in the way of the herbs, the energy of the herbs that you're working with, than running them through a mortar and pestle. That ritual, that process of sitting with them, of grinding them, of watching their texture change, of experiencing even the color will change, experiencing the aroma unfold as you break into those cellular structures and release the materials in there, is a very powerful act of connection, of communion. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why I have fallen in love with the mortar and pestle over my years of practice and consider this to be a tool without rival. Another thing that will happen as sort of a side result of working with a mortar and pestle, but especially if you're intentional about it, is that the herbs will begin to buzz and glow with your energy, right? And this is something we don't talk about a lot in pop, sort of reductionist forms of spells and magic, is that the energy of the magician, of the sorcerer, of the wizard, of the herbwise is equally as important as that of the plants, right? That we are mixing our magic with the magic of the plant allies. We are blending our magic, our medicine, with the medicine of the plant allies. So it is a coming together of two worlds, of the world of the plant and the world of the human. It is the coming together of two sets of virtues, the virtues of medicine and magic and wisdom of the plants, and the virtues of intent of the human person. And it's this commingling, it's the sacred relationship that actually unlocks a lot of the magic, especially through the perspectives of sorcery that we're working. So this opportunity to work with a tool that will infuse layers and layers of the herbs with your energy is pretty awesome and pretty helpful. The ritual of herb magic and really of crafting excellent herbal medicine starts in the preparation. So to me, when I start thinking about what I'm going to do, when I start meditating on which plants I might call in and how I'm going to set things up and when I'm going to do it and what the end result will be, let's say if I'm working for a client, the magic actually starts happening the minute I start planning. And so for me, the mortar and pestle part where I'm changing the texture of the herbs to make them more suitable to go into a sachet or an incense or a water, I'm already doing the work, right? So this is part of it. We sometimes divorce the preparatory work from the ritual itself, but actually they're very much the same. The mortar and pestle as a tool invites us into the work in a really tangible way. It gets us out of our head. It gets us out of thinking about the magic and into being part of the magic. So that's all very important. And I will say that even when the plants that I'm working with don't need to be powdered, they don't need to be ground up, maybe they don't need to be broken up at all, I still take them for a couple spins in the mortar and pestle because this is a tool of activation for me, as we'll talk about here in a second. It is very important. So even if I don't need to switch up the texture, the form of the plant, still probably going to go into the mortar at least once, right? So that brings us to discussing some of the mysteries of the mortar and pestle, some of the bits of symbolism that this contains. Now, there are layers and layers to this, and different people will attach more deeply to different aspects of it, but a few things that I would love for you to consider in your work and why this particular tool is so important to me. First is their symbolic relationship to cosmogony and cosmology, right? That the mortar symbolizes the earth. It is round, it is receptive, it holds, it contains everything. It's the base, right? The foundation upon which all of our world works. It is in effect an altar, but is symbolic of the world, the land, the earth. And in some perspectives, you could even say that the mortar could be an icon for the earth mother, the earth goddess. Similarly, the pestle symbolizes the cosmic pillar, the axis, the axis mundi, the world tree, right? The center around which all things dance and flow. So when you bring these two energies together, we have the process of creation, the function of creation, of harmony, the dance of the mortar and pestle represents the dance of the universe, the earth and the stars going around the central axis, and of course the mortar representing the earth goddess, and then the pestle can represent either a sky god or a masculine deity, or in my particular tradition, the green god, the wild god of our work that acts, again, as a harmonizing force together. So we have the world tree, the earth in the center. You can also look about phallus and womb, right? That the coming together of these two different functions is representative or a recreation of the creation of the cosmos, the constant unfolding of the world that we live in. So when we bring mortar and pestle together in our grinding meditations, we are, again, harmonizing or calling in both of those energies that when combined create a tertiary energy of manifestation, of bringing things into reality. I also think about really classic witches tools, right? Because people are always asking me about tools and altars and practices, and a lot of folks' references are contemporary witchcraft and pop witchcraft, so they know those tools really well, but maybe not very many tools outside of that practice. So if I were to align these to any of the tools of craft, I would say cauldron and wand. And really, when we look at deeper symbolism of cauldron and wand, they fit pretty perfectly in with mortar and pestle symbols. You know, we think about the cauldron as a vessel of creation, a vessel of transformation, that what is put into the cauldron comes out something else. The cauldron is, of course, transforming through the power of heat, if we think about the symbolism of the cauldron of Caradwyn, whereas the mortar and pestle is transforming through movement and dance and friction, right? We think about the cauldron's relation symbolism to the womb, to the other world, you know, moving into a space unseen and coming back out of that space. And similarly, the pestle as a type of wand figure that helps to direct energy, which it certainly is, because this is the part that is connected with our hand, our arm, and ultimately our heart center. This is where our energy is channeling through. The brute strength that we're using to mortar and pestle is transferring into the herbs through this, that we are directing our intention, that we are directing our magic and our will through the pestle, which represents the mind, the wand. So really, you have a fully functional cauldron and wand symbolism here that works really beautifully in herb work, because this is a tool that is ancient and timeless and global, and is one that has been crafted to support working with plants, right? That's why this tool exists, is to work with plants. So very interesting. And last but not least, I think about the grind, the dance, that there's this rhythm, you know, especially as folks get good at the mortar and pestle. There's a rhythm, a dance that happens that to me mimics the dance or the flow or the unfolding of the cosmos. So in a certain way, we are participating or mimicking the dance of the universe, the creative, generative process of the universe unfolding when we do this work. So there are so many layers of symbolism and magic and reflex that are happening that it's impossible for this work not to become saturated in virtue, saturated in magic and medicine and beautiful ritual and beauty itself. And so no doubt why mortar and pestle is my fave. So I want to end with just a little bit of talk about how I work with mortar and pestles in my own practice. And while I talk about this, I'm going to show you some, just so you can see some of my collection. I have a lot of them, and I continue to buy them, and people continue to gift them to me, and I love all of them. So this is just a small sampling of the ones that I work with the most. First, I have two really big pieces. They're very, very heavy. They don't require me to hold on to them to keep them steady. If they're on a table or on a countertop, they will stay stable. They're very heavy. And the pestles themselves are also quite heavy. So again, when I'm doing the grinding, I can let the weight of the pestle do a lot of the work rather than having to lean into it and put all of it into my joints, right? Which there is a little bit of that, but the heavier the pestle, the less work that we have to do. So these two bigger pieces, these two heavier mortar and pestle pieces, I use mostly for crafting medicine. When I am breaking up plant material in larger quantities, they make it easier for me. They're easier to keep in the kitchen. They're materials that I can wash with a little bit of soap and water and make sure they're nice and clean for the medicine that I'm going to make. And both of these have been with me for a very, very long time. So I really love both of these big ones. And then I have a couple smaller ones that I keep on my working table, and these are more for, more magical workings. I'm breaking down herbs for a sachet. I'm breaking down herbs for some incense or to do a wash. And these smaller guys are, the mortar is going to be held in one hand. The pestle is going to be held in another hand. And they're going to let me just quickly get some herbs ground up or just do the ritual of mortar and pestle. I have a symbolic mortar and pestle as well, which I keep on my plant spirit shrine. I don't really use this one in a utilitarian way. It's actually made out of wood, so it's really light. It would be kind of hard to work with that way, but it symbolizes my practice. It symbolizes the herb-wise ancestors. It symbolizes all the things that we just discussed, and really acts as a grounding point of earth and world pillar on my shrine. So I really appreciate that. I will also work with them occasionally as vessels of charging. Now I do keep some bowls for that. And again, if you've read either of my books, bowls play a big role in my work for a similar reason to the mortar. But sometimes I will place herbal material or even finished charms or sachets or incense blends into the mortar and pestle as a way to charge and bless them. And similarly, I will sometimes tuck written petitions into the mortar and pestle on my shrine as a way to sort of hand it over to the universe, to set it at the base of the world tree, into the sovereignty of the Earth Mother, that connecting point of the deities that I work with. So that's something that you can consider as well. So beautiful tool, so powerful. There are so many styles of them out there, so many forms, but one small one that can be part of your practice is really powerful. They're such a beautiful tool, and they really invite us to connect with the herbs in such a different way. So if you work with a mortar and pestle, or if you have other tools that are as important to you as this tool is to me, I would love to hear about them down in the comments below. Share, let me know what you're up to. And down in the video comments below, you will also find a way to link to my advanced classes, courses, our monthly plant spirit journeys, and all that good stuff. So with that, go out, enjoy your tools, see them as sacred, keep them as sacred. I'll see you in our next class.